Now for a review of what's making the headlines. So we're going to begin with this day newspaper. Let's see what the top stories are telling us this morning. In this day, religious leaders reject U.S. claim of genocide against Nigerian Christians. 2027 National Assembly proposes November 2026 for presidential and governorship elections. Rwanda, Nigeria's economic recovery tangible, rooted in fiscal consolidation and sectoral resilience. New Telegraph, electoral reforms. NAS proposes November 2026 for presidential governor polls. ASU strike, FG enforces no work, no pay, directs roll call. Head count. The Punch, 2027 opposition splits over NAS political or poll shift plan. We also have Makinde warns Wike camp against stopping PDP convention. Daily Independent, airlines dump local MRO outfits, spend $1 billion yearly offshore. Experts warn against $2.8 billion global borrowing drive amid debt concerns. Enugu Agog as Governor Mba set to join APC. The Guardian, 72.64% of Nigeria's petrol imported amid rivalry from new refineries. Daily Sun, ASU strike, FG directs VCs to enforce no work, no pay. Nobody can threaten us, Piwuna ASU president. Stop destroying people's property, Obi wants FG. Governors, Tinubu and Okalo Khan mourn renowned cleric Umar Ekpai. Leadership, we're not intimidated by no work, no pay threats, say varsity lecturers. Make peace with bandits, Sheikh Gumi tells Tinubu. Vanguard, do or die clash. 3 teams, 1 chance. To the international headlines now. The international papers. Let's start with the Citizen newspaper. The war is over. Then the Daily Telegraph, Trump, let's end Ukraine war. The Independent this morning, hostages freed at last as Trump basks in praise. Daily Graphic, government approves hiring of health workers, thousands to be employed, salary arrears to be paid next month. The Guardian, truce brings joy as Israelis and Palestinians are freed. And finally, the Financial Times, Trump declares historic dawn after final 20 living Israeli hostages are freed. All right, let's go back to this day newspaper now to see the details of these stories this morning. We'll start with the religious leaders reject U.S. claim of genocide against Nigerian Christians. What is happening is that the dust has not settled on this particular matter. We remember that the U.S. was going to designate or has designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern following what it terms as genocide against Christians in the country. It says there is no religious freedom in Nigeria and that cannot continue. Benga, if you followed the conversations online, there's the story that some individuals are working to see that a private army is put together in order to intervene if necessary in Nigeria. The thought is that there might be a sinister agenda beyond the protection of Christians in Nigeria. However, we also have a statement from the politician Gbenga Hashim yesterday when he said that the Nigerian government prefers 2027 politics to national survival. So, I mean, there is that point about Nigeria being able to protect its citizens. These are issues that have to be addressed, and what is coming from outside the international dimension of interference and intervention by world powers because of certain interests in Africa.
I think if I would say, every society has its worldview, and that's the collective view of the people and the elders as the custodian of knowledge. So there is a peculiarity that only the people that empathize with the society can really tell its own story. And people, the Western cultures, the Western countries have tried, they've made attempt to label Africa, label Nigeria in their own different ways, but there's a deeper level of empathy, empathetic understanding of what the situation really is. Otherwise, they would misrepresent. And that's why Nigeria needs to come out louder, stronger, and clearer in telling its own narrative, in owning its own story. And that's why I feel that the best institution to do that is the foreign ministry. Use with the Nigeria's, with the appointment of an astute ambassador to lead that front line, that strategic role in placing Nigeria's picture in its right perspective. You and I know that the issue of genocide, it's not as if we don't have some pockets of attacks on Christians and Muslims. Even in Zamfara state, in Katsina state recently, it was an attack on the mosque. So that's a misplacement of narrative. That's a lost narrative in itself. But when we don't have a voice in the international community, when we don't have a well-trained and an astute diplomat that could sell this narrative, that could correct these labels, these presumptions, this speculative understanding of what's happening deep in Nigeria, then this erroneous impression continues to prevail. So I think that's the missing narrative that we're having right now in the country.
Yeah, but you also understand where politicians themselves are saying that some of the problems we have in Nigeria is that politicians form the cross of terrorist sympathizers in this country and propagators of extreme violence in this country. The kind of rhetoric that you see, whether it's on the campaign trail and after the campaign trail, and what they do in order to make sure they win elections. That's part of the problem we have. And if we don't handle this, then there's no, what kind of narrative are you having if in reality you have this crisis in your country? And that's what Benga Hashim was talking about. I think it shouldn't be lost on us. But let's go to the second story. In this day, 2027 National Assembly proposes November 2026 for presidential governorship elections. If this happens, this will be historic. You know, it's going to be a landmark change. And they're going to do this because they're targeting, or the target is to end post-swearing-in litigations. We know that the country has become highly litigious, particularly elections. So they're trying to make sure that elections or all court cases end before the swearing-in of the president or the governor. So let's see, according to section 4, subsection 7 of the proposed amendment, it says, quote, elections into the office of the president and the governor of a state shall not be later than 185 days before expiration of the term of office of the last holder of the office. So a calculation of that 185-day period before May 29, 2027 indicates that elections will have to be conducted in November 2026. This is new.
Yeah, I think it's a welcome development because when you look at the antecedents of our elections that has ended in court and the living transition process in legal uncertainty, that does not speak well of the integrity of our institution, because you and I know that when the winner gets into power, without setting the issue of legal uncertainty, he seizes the instrument of governance to propagate himself in power. So I think that it's a welcome development, and the National Assembly that are proposing this Electoral Act amendment should speed up to ensure that this sees the light of day and is not quashed down. So I think it's a welcome development.
But what do you also think about this argument that it will distract from governance? Because already this is 2 years ahead of the elections. We're talking about parties, we're talking about decampment, we're talking about what's going to happen. And then if you bring that forward, you know, to November 2026, it means all governance shuts down.
I think for me it's a catch-22 situation. The very reason why it would create a distraction in governance, the very much reason it will remind it will give accountability and a sense of stewardship to the current government in power. You would know that your tenure is about winding down, and whatever plans and programs you need, and that would also speak to the urgency in our budgetary system. Now that we are running 3 budget system, so when you know that you will be tidying up by November, you will need to strengthen up so many key issues in governance. I think it's a welcome development. In as much as it has its own downsides, I think the merit far outweighs the demerits.
All right, the last story in this day, Rwanda, Nigeria's economic recovery tangible, rooted in fiscal consolidation, sectoral resilience. Here he was talking about the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics data, to which he says is both empirical and anecdotal tests. You know, some people have doubted that data that is being churned out by the NBS of recent in order to support the government, but Rwanda is saying here that it is empirical. At the end of the day, I think for Nigerians, what matters most is how this affects their day-to-day lives. Yeah,
I think I would also stand with the NBS report, because it's also in sync with the World Bank reports. And I think that it's true that the physical policy, it's also the way to our economic path to restoration and growth. Because when you look at the data and the statistics, the sectorial, when you also look at the sectorial analysis, but it's also worrisome that the NMPCL is yet to render its audit with over 200 trillion naira unaudited accounts. So that leaves so much worry in the transparency. We've gotten the key indices of the non-oil sector. We can see that we need to re-strengthen and to rejig our industrial and trade roadmap. But when it comes to the main source of the nation's revenue drive, which is in the oil sector, there's so much lacuna. The Nigerian Union of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, headed by Benga Komolabe, is doing a wonderful job giving us up-to-date statistics with the development which is being driven by the Petroleum Industry Act. So much prospects, but with NMPCL still a flight in the ointment, it leaves a lot of worry. The House of Reps has been trying to probe this, raising about 20 questions, and wondering why the account still remains unaudited. So this leaves a lot of questions, and I think that in the spirit of transparency and accountability, this institution should come out clean and let's know what's happening.
A lot of expectations on the economic front. Moving on to Daily Sun, ASU strike, FG directs VCs to enforce no work, no pay. This comes as the Academic Staff Union of Universities embarks on that 2-week warning strike. What is the bone of contention here, you might ask? There is the conclusion of the renegotiated 2009 FGN ASU agreement, release of withheld 3.5 month salaries, sustainable funding, cessation of victimization of lecturers. There's outstanding payment of 25 to 35% salary arrears, among others. ASU says this action will be, quote, total and comprehensive, and so they're pushing to have these issues addressed by the government. We've been here again and again. Did you witness strike during your time at university?
I did. Yes. I suffered close to 2 years. It's really dashing my hope of graduating at a record age.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we've been
very painful experience.
And that's one of the reasons why many parents have pulled and continue to pull their kids from tertiary institutions into public universities. Not it doesn't mean that the private universities are better in terms of quality, and they're not not all of them. Some of them are not better in terms of quality. So it goes back to the point of what do we do about ASU and federal government if we have been doing the same thing for over 30 years and it hasn't helped us. It just shows a systematic failure in policy and a deep governance issues that are rooted that must be addressed.
Yeah, you talked about the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean that the private institutions are better than the public institutions. Yes, when you check the recent World Global Ranking, we could see UI coming first, Bayer University of Kano second, and University of Lagos coming third. Covenant University, that used to be first in recent years, is at a distant fourth position. So it shows that the situation clearly indicates that it's not as if the private universities are better than the public universities, but now parents are, it's like an Hobson's choice thrown at the parents. When you look at the situation on ground, since 2009, that's 16 years ago, this issue ought to have been resolved. And what are these issues? The provision of the revitalization fund for universities, the issues bordering on university autonomy, and the release of earned academic arrears, and the welfare of the university, and the funding of the university structure, and the payment system for these university lecturers. All these are just issues that reflect a policy failure and a government failure also in addressing many of these issues. There have been trading of blames. The federal government is saying that they've called ASU and they have made substantial progress in settling many of these issues, but it's also clear that the ASU gave the federal government a 2-week warning strike to address many of these things, and it's reported that they didn't show any sign that they were really determined to address this issue. So I think that there is a need for the federal government and ASU to have an urgent meeting to rescue the citadel of learning from collapsing, because that's the situation now. It's a looming collapse.
These disruptions is also one of the reasons why there is a flight or a brain drain of lecturers from the universities out of frustration. People think that they don't have good working conditions and it's not ever going to get better. So people leave in droves, and that affects, again, the quality of education. Daily Independent this morning, Enugu Agog as Governor Mba set to join APC. Shatima Akpabio Abbas Wata, governors, others storm Enugu State. Governor of Enugu State, Peter Mba, will leave the party on whose platform he was elected, the People's Democratic Party, to join the ruling All Progressives Congress. Honorable Augustine Nnamani, who is the former state chairman of the PDP, claims that this is happening because the PDP has, quote, mistreated and betrayed the people of the Southeast, especially by its failure to recognize Udo Okoye as National Secretary in line with the party's tradition. He continued, the PDP chose a few people in Abuja over and above the Southeast, end of quote. In essence, Governor Mba is solely placing the blame on the party, for him to leave. So I reckon this is a really sad day for the PDP. This one is a big loss, particularly when it is a performing governor, of which Mba is. Ultimately, this reflects both, personal political survival for the governor and weaknesses within the opposition party, PDP, doesn't it?
Yeah, beyond the issue of Udo Okoye that the party failed to recognize, which I would say is more of a legal issue than political. The governors represent the founding pillars of the party, and coming barely a month to the elective national convention, that all-important day is a big setback for the party, even though we see the spokesperson of the PDP coming out to say that they are undeterred and they remain undaunted.
No, this is a blow.
But this is a huge blow, I must say, to the future of the party, especially when it concerns the 2026 supposedly election. So I think we also have the issue of the 6-point demand coming from coming from the Minister of the FCT, which interestingly has a court backing, talking about the South-South zonal structure, which cuts across Plateau and some of the southeastern states. That's part of the problem, because the Southeast, or Governor Mba and his supporters, feel that, in this quote, that the party is paying more attention to Abuja
over those in the Southeast region. They had made this request. It is a legal matter, but the way you are able to manage the issues arising from your party will determine whether the members decide to stay or not. Well, he has given an excuse to leave, but really, really a sad day.
And he's joining the long list. He's not just the only one.
No.
And so there are indications that some others might also be joining in the coming days. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, some also argue that the PDP hasn't been good to the Southeast. You know, traditionally, most of the states or most of the people in that part of the country are PDP. They voted for that party since 1999. APC is not really on ground. You know, if you don't rig elections, APC is not on ground on the Southeast. So we're going to see how this goes. Obviously, he is the governor. He gets the ticket of the APC to run again. So it might be that he wins again, you know, because he has the instruments of power.
Absolutely. But, I think it's a race for political survival.
Right. Daily Sun, no, we've seen Daily Sun. Let's go to Leadership newspaper. Mariam Sanders' presidential pardon, grave injustice, says her husband's family. The family of late Bilyaminu Bello are really disappointed with the president for the pardon of Mariam Sanders, who was convicted for killing him. Sanders was sentenced to death in January 2020 for the murder of her husband. Now she walks free. Is the worst possible injustice, says the family. You know, this particular presidential pardon was bound to be controversial. She had spent only 6 years and 8 months in prison. She was sentenced to death. This has been deeply emotional, and the sense is that the family feels really betrayed. And I mean, while presidential pardon may be justified on grounds of mercy, rehabilitation, or political calculation, it also highlights the delicate balance between compassion and justice.
This is a very tough one.
Yes,
actually.
it is.
This is someone that the grandfather pleaded that he had suffered the loss of his word, and he can't bear losing another one. A very pathetic situation, even though it resonates a very negative sentiment for those who had also lost the families of the husband. In as much as this is clear, I think it's a matter of it's a constitutional matter that I think the National Assembly might need to review this sweeping prerogative of mercy given to the president, so that could control the usage. But as of today, the president has that discretionary power to declare, to offer mercy and amnesty to whom he chooses to. So that's the underlining and the fundamental reality. Albeit very painful. I understand the sentiment of losing such a painful family member.
It is a presidential power that cannot be challenged. However, you also see that it has to be used very sensitively. All right, New Telegraph, quickly, 3,000 banking-related complaints recorded in 6 months, says the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, between March and August 2025. The complaints bordered mainly on failed transactions, unauthorized deductions, and delayed refund concerns. You know, banking and fintech sectors accounted for the highest volume of these incidents nationwide, and this has led to the recovery of 10 billion naira for customers. We know that the central bank had last week directed banks to refund failed transactions within 48 hours. I mean, this directive from the CBN was necessary in light of this crisis with transactions and deductions that were not unknown deductions from people's accounts. Let's quickly move to the international papers. We have here the Sun. After 737 days in captivity, freed from hell, 20 Israeli hostages are home at last. And the Times newspaper, 2 years of torment over as hostages reunited with families. A historic moment it was yesterday, wasn't it? Indeed,
a very significant breakthrough in the long walk to the peace plan in Gaza. And I'm particularly concerned about those sticking points, the disarmament of Hamas and also the demilitarization of Gaza. So how would does President Trump have a diplomatic or a political solution to this? Because it's a very fragile situation, very uncertain situation that it's prevailing in Gaza now. So one wonders how President Donald Trump would be able to use his political dexterity to navigate that because when you look at this, it's like Adesuwa said, it's a misleading simplification to think that the war in Gaza is just between Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
We have a situation where Iran and also Israel have threatened swift retaliation should there be any violation of the peace deal. So, and the 20-point peace deal, you and I know that it's a very complex draft resolution.
Indeed, a lot of work for them to tidy up. President Trump is relishing, the praises, the applause heaped on him for this landmark peace deal. He is a showman, so he's really lapping it up. Let's look at Cameroon. Cameroon is a next door neighbor here in West Africa. Cameroon had elections on Sunday, and the police has clashed with opposition candidate supporters in that country. The Cameroonian authorities have warned of false results circulating in the country, and we know that Paul Biya, who is 92, is on that ballot, seeking to extend 43 years in power. A country of 30 million people with a majority young population. Most of the people running that country are in their 90s, 80s, and at least 70s. And so the question here is whether Cameroonians have what it takes to withstand this president or to withstand entrenched political forces in their country. They need a change.
Absolutely, they need a change, and there's this saying that those who make a peaceful transition impossible will make a violent one inevitable. You can see what's happening in some African countries. This is a president that came into power in 1982, November 6 precisely, and he's been able to midwife about 8 transitions, sustaining himself in power for over 40 years. I think, but the situation now is that we don't have a formidable opposition against Paul Biya. And he said, we all saw what he said at the Sunday election. He said nothing is given. And analysts are saying that he stands a very high probability of winning that election, which sends a very dangerous signal to Africa's sustaining democracy. And
finally, before we go, Madagascar, political crisis there as well. The president, Andry Rajoelina, has fled the country following weeks of Gen Z protests. He fled in a French military plane. It was reported. The protests had, started September 25. We have units of the army had defected to support the protesters, who were asking for a change in government. They insisted that they will remain on the streets until the president leaves. And so it's also a country of 30 million people. The median age is less than 20. Another political crisis there.
A volatile situation, I must say. Yes. These are people who started a complaint on basically failure of governance, complaint of shortage of water and electricity. The Gen Zs have spoken. They've spoken loud and clear. And this is coming from decades of mistrust between the governments that have and the people. This is a polity that have suffered military takeover about 8 times since several times since 1960.
He came to power through a coup in
2009.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's not been able to the credibility of the transition process witnessed so far has been doubted. He was the leader of the transitional government, and he's expected to midwife a credible election, which has come under severe criticism. Now, the one point that is very important, it's been reported, if confirmed, that will send a very dangerous signal that he was flown away through a French military plane. So it shows a very a kind of questionable alliance with the French government, which shows their role in political unrest and democratic crisis in Africa.
All right, that's all we can take for the paper review today.